Hello and welcome to AAU Play. My name is Aga. I'm assistant professor at Aalborg University Business School, and today I'm going to share with you some information about human capital in multinational corporations and the mobility. I'm also going to talk about the future of the job, something that should be of interest to you. So here we have a short recap of the agenda. That is basically split between mobility, trends and types, and also mobility now and then future of the job. So why would we care about the topic and why am I interested in studying this? So actually, the facts say that only slightly above 3% of the world's population are currently living away from home. So actually the mobility of people across borders, it's a rather novel activity. However, when we look at different numbers, we see that in Denmark over 50% of the GDP, which is the value of everything produced in Denmark, comes from importing and exporting. This is basically emphasizing the importance of multinational firms. Also, the foreign investment in Denmark is a very large contributor to the GDP. So putting these two things together, we see that there will be important contributions of multinational firms to mobility of people across borders. And actually this is exactly what this graph that I'm showing you here is demonstrating. So let us focus on Europe. We see that actually the numbers of migrants across whole Europe are on severe increase between 1990s and year 2000. So continuing with the motivation of the teaser of my talk, we also see, coming back to the companies or the multinational firms, that basically across a broad range of industries, there are mobility programs that these firms implement, meaning once they hire someone, they are going to move these people around across borders. And this is what's going to be the next part of my talk. So how are these mobility trends in multinational corporations? So firms move different types of people differently. So they can move somebody who is a home country employee, let's think of a Dane in Denmark, to another country where they start operations. That's called expatriation. Of course, if the same person comes back home after a while, they are repatriated. That's one type of mobility, okay? They also use different types of employees. So thinking of a large Danish firm like Maersk or Arla, they have operations in many, many different countries. They will be hiring local people, so what we refer to as host or third country employees. So taking from the local labor pools, either the locals in the country they're into or other people. That sort of contributes to the geographical mosaic of human capital in firms. So why are they doing this? What is sort of behind? What is the firm's motivation to hire this very diverse workforce and human capital? Well, of course, they need to fill in positions that they are having. So, for instance, going abroad and starting operations in a different European or world country, they will need to have a manager, and perhaps they want this manager to be hired within the company. Perhaps they want to hire the person from the market. We will get back to that. Well, they also want to train their own staff that they already have. So an assignment abroad, which might be particularly relevant for you, might contribute to promoting these people and further building their careers. And as you have seen, a lot of firms have the mobility programs, so perhaps we can think about this assignment as some kind of prerequisite in some contexts for a future career. Also, when thinking about a Danish firm going abroad, sometimes they might send their own employees, their home country people, to do some control and monitoring. Think of a Danish company growing a subsidiary in a whole different country, they want to have a trusted person heading the operations there. So here is a short recap and also a graphical illustration of how firms are hiring in terms of the composition of their staff, and also in terms of sort of where the hiring is happening. So we have the headquarters of the company, and also we have 3 different subsidiaries. And I'm going to illustrate what I just told you about. So we have ethnocentric M&Es that basically use the expatriates and repatriates. So a Danish firm sending Danish individuals in a subsidiary abroad, okay? The polycentric M&E or firm will hire in a different subsidiary right here, let's say in Singapore, people who are local there, so Singaporeans. And finally, we have a pretty complex scenario in which the Danish M&E goes in yet another market and hires somebody who is not local and who is not a Dane, so somebody coming from a completely different country. That is called geocentric motivation. So you can see it's a fairly complex activity that the M&Es are engaging in. It's very crucial for them. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into mobility types right now. And I've already hinted that M&Es can either use their own employees who they have already hired within the firm or hired outside, so from the market. And let me present you with 4 archetypes that build exactly upon that idea, and that will basically elaborate on how M&Es hire, okay? So we have 2 dimensions here in this 2x2. We have the internal hiring, which is specifically for the people who are already part of the company, okay? And we have the external hiring that pertains to people who are hired from the market. There are further 2 more dimensions that we can dig deeper within this framework. So we can have people who are locally available or who are global hires. And that gives us these different 4 dimensions. So let us delve into perhaps at least 2 of them. We will have an internal local hire with someone who is basically moved by the firm. So imagine a person who is from perhaps Singapore but used to work, so was repatriated in the Danish company's headquarters in Aalborg. And now what the company is doing, they want to expand to Singapore. So basically they invite that person working for them in Aalborg to go in a way back to their own country with all the knowledge and experience of the company they have. You already hear that this type of staffing has implications for the firm, because the person who is been sent on such an assignment internally will have a high company knowledge versus somebody who is hired externally. So let's take this scenario. So external and local hire would be somebody in the same scenario hired in Singapore but coming from outside of the firm, okay? So they just put a job ad and they hired somebody externally. We of course have the 2 segments here, the top right hand and lower right hand side, and these are both global hires, so people who do not actually dispose of in-depth knowledge of the market, and they are either internal hires or external hires. So typically the global internal hires would be a Dane who is moved to Singapore, right? So a classical scenario of an expatriation, again having a really high knowledge of the firm, but perhaps a low knowledge connections of the market. While the lower segment on the right would be somebody equally ignorant or equally disposing of equal knowledge of the market, since he's a global, not a local, but also not really knowing the firm. So this is important for the firms to be aware of, because it bears implications for how the operations can be carried about, right? So I also promised you we will go a little bit back in the history and see how mobility looked like before and how it looks now. So just to give you an overview, this is not a new phenomenon. So firms have been moving people around the borders basically as early as from the 60s, probably even before. However, mobility changed a lot. So historically, traditionally, firms used expats for control, also for filling some gap skills, so when they couldn't hire locally. It used to be from the headquarters outside, so pretty much one direction, and mostly done by Western firms. Also, the profile of people who have been moved was pretty much the same. So these were usually males with a family who was following them, pretty middle-aged, so sort of mid of their careers, and on relatively long assignments. So that has changed drastically over the 90s and 2000. And now we have a sort of broader set of motivations for the firm. So they also want to train the employees in different directions. So they bring people in from other countries to their headquarters, not only send out. And also the profile of people and the duration of assignments are changing so that more females participate, and the family role is not always perhaps that of followers, so families could be integrated. So this is the historical overview. And I'm going to continue with something perhaps even closer to your hearts that has to do with the changing nature of mobility and virtual assignments and technologies. So let us try to understand this illustration here. So here we are looking precisely at physical mobility, how high it is from lower to the right-hand side, and also how much disruption does a move imply for a worker, okay, on the vertical axis from low to high. So we can see that the traditional expats that I told you about involved a lot of mobility. They were moved across borders and a lot of disruption in their work. They were basically taking on a whole different assignment when they moved abroad, okay? So right now, this all is changing. We have short-term assignees that perhaps sometimes have to move somewhere but then come back home. What the scholars termed international business travelers, so people, again, who move pretty frequently, but their work is not disrupted. It's a series of shorter travels. But we also have people who work, if you wish, globally, actually without moving from home, the global domestics, right? This is their job to sit and connect with people who are in different locations. And of course, the global virtual team members that, through the technology that allows us to do so, basically work within dispersed teams of people who are in many different locations. Perhaps they also need to travel sometimes so that the work might be disrupted in a way. So this is something that is here to stay, the changing nature of mobility, and perhaps it's gonna also have implications for you guys. So just to finish up on that one, you know where I'm probably headed. Of course, these trends have been amplified with the recent pandemics. And these numbers show us that a large amount of companies have been canceling assignments, stopped repatriation or other short-term assignments, or perhaps delayed them, meaning that these have been replaced with this virtual type of mobility, so to say. And that might be there to stay. So how mobility changed over years and how it is shaping everyone, also your careers, is also a question of generations. Here a short recap about how different types of job components have been changing over time. So perhaps we could compare the green lines for baby boomers and what is closest to my generation, Generation Y, and you would see that the flexibility of hours, the importance of it has been also changing. So important consideration for you, how your attitudes to work, flexibility at work is, and how perhaps is it different from other people. We will get back to that. Of course, related to that, there is also the importance of different skills that comes into play. We don't have attitudes towards mobility, but that will be coming in here equally. And then finally, the skills that are in more and more demand by firms. So also something that changes over time. just to land before I finish on what mobility is for generation like you based on the OECD report, and sort of attitudes towards flexible sort of temporary job versus permanent job. That is basically as compared across groups, very high in the group that you might be in. So something you can consider. That was it. I would like to invite you to look at the assignment, where I would like you to reflect on what mobility means for you, and also what are the elements of jobs that you will be considering in while applying for jobs in the future. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the talk. Thank you.